So we talked about raw materials, critical raw materials, energy, and now we're going to talk about really big infrastructure. So we're talking now about Atlantic port mobility and connectivity and how to really reshape reliable supply routes. So we know that Atlantic mobility, port connectivity, these topics are playing a really increasingly important role in shaping new supply chain routes and shaping new strategies, and particularly within the context of global trade and the growth of e-commerce. Now, what we're looking at today is really how to fully leverage the potential of Atlantic mobility and port connectivity, and how to adopt perhaps a more holistic approach to supply chain management and taking into account the entire value chain. And to discuss this, we've got a real EU-Canada formation here. I have two eminent speakers with me. I have on my left here Tom Hautekiet, who is CCO of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, not far from here, not far from home. That port is Europe's second largest. It is a real driver of the circular economy and of the energy transition, looking at no fewer than about 800 destinations from the port. So, you know, it's really no exaggeration to say that that port connects Europe to the world, and it's also a driver of at least 72,000 direct jobs. So, a real engine of the Belgian and of the European economy. And then further to my left, I have Geneviève Deschamps, who is the president and the CEO of the Port of Montreal, or the Port de Montréal, which is also, I believe, the second biggest in Canada, a major contributor to the economic development of Quebec and of Canada more broadly, and of course of the world, because that's what ports do. I have a number for you there, which is 37 million. That's the number of tons of goods which pass through the port of each year, and that is driving roughly a revenue, or is accounting for about 41 billion Canadian dollars in terms of the value of those goods that are passing through. The port has access to 110 million consumers and 100 countries. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied in all these amazing figures. And Geneviève, about herself, she says her goal is to guide the efforts of her teams into trying to implement the port's big strategic goals and ambitions. So I would like to now start with some questions, and what I think it's important to talk about, again, we talked about it in the last panel, but the geopolitical context here. It's the backdrop to everything. Now, given that current geopolitical context in the situation, so how do you think Canada and the European Union and these Atlantic partnerships can really position themselves within, you know, other big infrastructure projects like the Belt and Road Initiative from China, the New Silk Road, or the EU's Global Gateway, EMEC from the USA? What do you think, what kind of role is to be played there? I will start with whoever grabs the microphone first. Geneviève?
I go first. Is it working?
We hear you.
Thank you for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be on the panel with Tom. We'll be talking about the relationship between European ports and our port. And a month ago, Tom was a guest speaker in Quebec, so I had the chance to introduce him to a presentation. It was the Association of Port in Canada, so he made a good presentation of the Port of Antwerp. So it's interesting for us to have experience from their part. And also, we are very unique in Quebec. Maybe I can just complete the position of the Port of Montreal. You mentioned that we are the second largest port in Canada. This is true. It's after the Port of Vancouver. Vancouver is on the west coast, so a lot of trans-Pacific shipments.
Yep.
So we are on the east coast, but we are a river port. We are not in the ocean. We are almost 1,000 kilometers inside the land. So it makes Montreal very unique in that position, and also in the types of vessels we have in Montreal, because we have collaboration with European port, but when you look at large European ports, we are not like that in Montreal. We have smaller vessels. And we are a destination port, so very efficient. So all the vessels that are coming to Montreal unload and reload in Montreal, so making the model kind of unique. So that completes my introduction. Yeah. So very happy to be here. So with the relationship with Europe, for sure it's a very important relation, and we are part of it's central for us, the Europe. Many of our containers and shipments are coming from Europe, and I think in the future we can continue to work together to strengthen the relationship, especially in the geopolitical and economic context with the world. And I just want to also complete. You mentioned that we reach 100 million customers with the port. We reach 100 million customers in less than 3 days around Montreal. So
Wow.
it's as I mentioned, very efficient way to reach customers.
Tom, would you like to come in?
Yes, I will also take a minute to position who we are. So we are the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. It's a merger between the Port of Antwerp and the Port of Zeebrugge, which happened 2 years ago. I was the previous CEO of the Port of Zeebrugge, so we were sitting on the negotiation table, and now I'm the executive in the executive team, which is in fact the person, the CCO, who is responsible for business. And a big part of my focus and attention goes to international trade, of course, speaks for itself, and transition. So that are the two big work streams where my time is going to. In a nutshell, who we are, so we are, as you mentioned, the second biggest port in Europe, in the top 12, I think, in the world, something like this. We are responsible for 5% of the Belgian GDP, to give you an idea.
Wow.
In total, direct and indirect, 164,000 people are involved, working in the port or around the port. So that's a massive figure. And we do have the biggest container terminal in Europe in our hands. We do import 15% of the LNG into Europe, and we are the biggest automotive terminal in the world. So this puts it a bit who we are and what we do. And now to come back on your question, yeah, I think a lot happened in the recent. If you look at the recent years, a lot has happened. You mentioned Belt and Road and European Gateway, Global Gateway, program. Indeed, I do see two big effects. You see first that countries or continents are creating those type of programs to aim market accessibility. Yeah. And to secure market accessibility. The second reason why they do is really to create a type of political relevance outside their own borders. Yeah, and that's really what happened in the recent years. But you see a second driver, which is coming from the business. There you do see that the big operators, think about Maersk, think about MSC, they organize themselves in a vertical integration and a horizontal integration. So they organize themselves in alliances to control the global supply chain on one hand. Second, they do acquisitions over the full supply chain. Think about a recent communication which we have seen of MSC, which will do a big investment in the port of Hamburg. Yeah. So you can look at this as a threat. Yeah, but you can also, as a port, you can organize yourself to also play a role into that. So what we do is we make sure that from a port authority, we are well connected with all those initiatives, so that we really track the volume in our direction and that we can create our hub function and our entrance door to Europe. Yeah, and that's why we also invest in rail as a port. We invest in rail, we invest in pipeline companies in order to attract all those volumes in our direction. So also our DNA is changing completely. Second, we create also a daughter company, which is part of Antwerp-Bruges International. Excuse me for the long title, but which is really doing investments around the world and is doing the same. So we also do take stakes in ports and we build our own port network around the world. And of course, we do this not only by taking a stake, but also pure by partnerships. And there I do think, yes, for sure, the relation we have in Montreal is a natural one because we talk the same language, we have the same culture, we have the same DNA. It talks easier, it's there for a while. And we are looking for such partnerships. So, but to conclude, I do think the time is ready that instead of only a bottom-up exercise, that's also a type of formalizing more that trade between Europe and US, Canada could be helpful.
Yeah, so you mentioned those LNG shipments there, liquefied natural gas, and indeed we know the eyes of the world were on the port over the last year and a half as Europe has been really racing to rid itself of dependence on Russian gas. And we know that Europe has been looking to Canada, a country with enormous natural resources, including oil and gas, but also, as we talked about in our last panel, raw materials. So I think, Geneviève, I'm going to put this to you. How do you think Canada can play a central role in the EU's plan, its current environmental transition, and of course this search for new sustainable supply chains?
Yeah, the Port of Montreal, we do have a vision. We will be part of the solution for a greener supply chain. As energy solution, for sure in Canada, in Quebec, we do have hydroelectricity that is a green energy, and it's cheap in Canada. So we are well positioned to have more energy that like biofuels or methanol or ethanol, and something that we will be looking at in the future to offer to the customers and to adapt to the market. Yeah, that's our vision on that for more energy transition. I'm not sure if it was your
yeah. Well, Tom, I throw it to you then, because you've given us this Canadian perspective. What about from you? You talked about this global footprint that you're looking out to. When you're looking across the Atlantic to Canada, what is it that you're looking at? What are you looking for there?
Well, we focus in our energy transition program, we focus on 3 domains. The first one is what we call CCU, CCS, so the capture of CO2. Yeah, centralize all the CO2 of Belgium, but also Northwest Europe in our port, liquefaction via pipelines in empty fields in the North Sea. So that's one big exercise. Not a correlation or connection with Canada, but it's the first one. The second one is circularity. So we do make sure that whatever we are investing in the port, that a sufficient part of that is for circular economy.
Okay.
And that's growing very fast. To give you an idea, the biggest investment plot, which we freed up, which was 100 hectares, 80% is filled already. It's all only US companies, only in circularity. Yeah. So just to give you an idea, it's really on the top of our list. It's clear choices we make. And then the third one, we come to sustainable molecules. Yeah. And there we want to be the front runner, the number one importation hub in Europe of green molecules. Yeah. Hydrogen, which is in its derivatives, ammonia, methanol, as we all know, in its colors. Yeah. We need a part for ourselves, and we want to be also the Panama Canal to Germany, because Germany will need a massive figure and amount of that. So we look at offtake markets, very close contact with the German authorities also on what they expect from ourselves, building the infrastructure at our port, but then you come to the supply. And if you look at supply, there are some countries in the region, in the world where we focus on. It's the Northern Africa, Middle East, East Coast of US, Canada. These are the natural companies, the natural countries where we're looking at, where we're scanning all the projects and the partners in order to get the molecules from there into Europe. And that's why I was in Canada recently, in order to talk to all those Everwinds pattern projects, Birchard, and a lot of them, just to understand where are they in the preparation, how much of that will come to Europe, that we align the timelines between the projects and our infrastructure and the German offtake market, and we want to play a facilitating role into that.
So we have next to me, you have next to me 2 ports, 2 speakers, different continents, but actually what you don't know is that they have also developed a very special partnership between these 2 ports. So Geneviève, do you want to tell us a bit about that? How did we get here? Where did the partnership come from? And what's the vision for the future? What are your objectives?
Yes, sure. As Tom mentioned, we do have the same vision and the same vision for development and strategies. So it was probably almost 10 years ago. I wasn't at the port at that time, but it was 10 years ago that we signed the first collaboration agreement with the port of Antwerp. So it's been going on since 10 years. We have the same challenges in the ports, even if we are on two different continents. So maybe I can give a couple of examples where we collaborate and we have interaction. first is on innovation and technology. It's an important part of the future of our ports. We do have to use more technology, have more previsibility of the ships and everything in the supply chain. So we are collaborating on that. And we are also members of Chain Ports. That is a group of limited number of ports around the world that are talking also about the same subject. So we are there together also. We were talking about environmental transition. It's another subject that is it's common to the two ports. So we share about that also. And the other one is less I would say intuitive, but we are a port in the city. We are in Montreal. The port was there many years ago, and the city grew. So we are very close to citizens. So we do have, we are like Antwerp. Antwerp is also a city port. So we need to have, and we share with the Antwerp more in collaboration, develop the port and be able to make investment in Montreal, also in relations with the citizens and the neighbors. The port in Montreal is known, but not, I would not say that it's admired. The people know that the port is there, but they want to know more about our activities. So I think that we learn a lot from European and Antwerp around that. It's maybe you want to complete that.
No, it's really learning from both parts. So a lot we can learn from each other. But we are also learning from the Port of Montreal. So I recently, when I was there, we were really curious what the steps they have been taken on electrification, because we are really behind on that, and we really want to understand how you done, what's your business model behind that, because that's really, we are looking from both angles, what can we learn from each other, and there are some common challenges where we have to find a way ourselves and together.
There are other bigger common challenges, right? We know that there are new supply chain routes developing throughout the world, not least as a consequence of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, but also tensions with China. And that means that new port facilities really have to cope with, at the one time, growing demand, but on the other hand, also perhaps a smaller set of suppliers. And inflation's still higher than policymakers would like it to be. So within that, tell us about what your growth forecasts are for the next 5 years, given the possibilities, the risks of recession. You could start, Tom, you're here.
That's a lot in one question. Yeah, the world is changing, of course. What do we see? Well, there are some statements I want to make. First on China. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we want to de-risk China, but we do not want to decouple China. And I think that's important to understand why China. To give you an idea, we export more to China than we import from China. That's really something which is a misunderstanding in the market, but we export more in the direction of China than we import. So that's the first one. So China is a critical country and offset market for ourselves. Yeah? And of course, we want to keep that. We do also see that important players are moving still to China. We are the biggest chemical cluster in the world after Houston. BASF, to give you an example. BASF is the biggest production facility of BASF outside Ludwigshafen, Germany, is in Antwerp. But BASF has taken a huge investment in China. 10 billion they will do. So it speaks for itself that we have to keep the connection between that big Chinese plant and our plant in Antwerp. We should stick to that. You refer to Germany. Germany is sputtering. Yeah, it's but in fact, if you look in detail, the German market, the consumption market in Germany is still quite stable. But Germany is the third biggest export market in the world. Yeah, and of course, that local market is not compensating the fall back on the exportation worldwide. We do see that containers worldwide are falling back this year with 9%. Yeah, and Germany feels that extremely, of course. And we also see that in our figures. Our figures are -5, so we gain a little bit of market share, but it's also something new. We had growth for many, many years, and now we are going down. This brings us to the challenges. What should we do? We should invest in our today's core business. So containers are important or big. We are preparing and finalizing, in fact, an FID program to increase 50% of our container capacity. So today we have 15 million TEU of container capacity, and we will bring it to 22. So we will drastically increase the capacity of container business in Antwerp. That's the first one. Second, we want really to be a leader in importation of molecules, sustainable molecules, as I mentioned before. Massive figures, huge challenges. And then the third one is the automotive market is also completely changing. We discussed a lot about EVs before. Yeah. European brands are feeling the Chinese pressure. Yeah. And we are the biggest hub. So we have almost every week a request from China to import the new brands. But for a port authority, it's very good. But if you look from a European perspective, yeah, we are losing a bit track because we missed the boat on solar panels, all produced in China. We are on the risk with the EVs. Yeah, that the big European businesses and brands can lose their business also to China, but we really want to secure the liquid business. That we want to do.
And of course, there's now that probe that the European Union has announced into Chinese electric vehicle subsidies, something that Beijing has denounced. It says is basically an excuse for protectionism. You talked about de-risking there. As opposed to decoupling, of course. Just briefly, seeing as you brought it up, do you feel that your point of view is being listened to by policymakers? I mean, this is such a hot topic.
Well, we are in very close contacts, of course, with the European Commission on those topics. I think we are taking the right statements. Also, we follow completely what the directions are. We keep the market and we keep the contacts as they are, but we understand very well if they are taking initiatives to protect European markets also. We completely understand. Yeah.
Geneviève, let me pass the floor to you now. I mean, we were talking about looking ahead with a pretty risky forecast. What's your expectation for growth? What's your plan?
Yeah, ports are looking at a long term. We have infrastructure that we have to be there for the long term, to have stable infrastructure. So at the Port of Montreal this year in 2023, for sure we see a decrease in volumes caused by the economic slowdown and the inflation situation. It's compared to last year, we are probably close to 11% decrease in volumes, in container volumes. In Montreal, we are diversified, so overall our decrease is not 11%, but for the container is more as import, and we export also in Montreal 50%, so the exportation is going well. So when we are looking at the future, we do now have a large expansion project that we are looking at. We've been working on that project since many years. We bought the lands 30 years ago, so it was a vision for the long term. So we are still looking at that project and developing that project to be ready when the volumes will be there, because they will come back, and what we see is there will be an increase in the volumes that we will have in Montreal. And for the moment, Montreal is almost full. So we handle around 1.7 million containers. So the large expansion project will add 50% to that capacity. But we cannot stop now, even with the slowdown, because we need to be ready for the future and to be there when the volumes will increase. And it creates a better stability also in the market.
And in terms of stability, I mean, it's not even that long ago, although many of us would like to forget it, that it was so totally disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, I can imagine that was felt very acutely in ports. I mean, the closing of borders, and of course, and then since then, of course, there's been a severing of economic ties with Russia and resulting inflation to some extent. So what I want to ask you, I mean, you've presented there, Geneviève, a bit more of a positive picture. Do you think this more gloomy, difficult, challenge-laden environment is just a new reality that you have to accept? Or do you think that if there is more effective transatlantic cooperation between Canada and Europe, could we see then a situation of a return to more competitive supply environment?
Yeah, the pandemic changed a lot the situation, and we realized, we already knew, but we realized even more that the supply chains were so important for everybody. So I think that as a part, we have to adapt and to be more proactive than reactive to some situation. And I think that the market now and how it's going in the supply chains and the routes that containers are taking, that we will be more resilient in the future. As a matter of fact, India became one of our large partners, and volumes from Asia are transiting to Europe. So it's something that we observe in the market in the last couple of years. So yes, the pandemic, the economic slowdown, the perturbation, but I think that everything makes the parts more solid, and we make changes that are good for the future.
And Tom, what about you? Just something that businesses just have to learn to live with?
Yeah, I think these are very challenging times, and it will never come back. So if you look what happens, we have a shift in economic power.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have changing supply chains. You see demographic growth in areas, take Nigeria, in areas where we do not have a big industrialization, and we have shortage in labor where we have a lot of industrialization, and we have climate change. So just this to say, to sum up, this will not change. So it's there to stay. So this brings us to what are the big programs where we are working around? It speaks for itself. It's sustainability, it's technology, it's transformation, and it's new partnerships, new collaborations. And this makes it also interesting because in those new partnerships, as we work around those items and those topics, and you find new friends and new ideas to share. But I just want to end with a positive thing. We have all proven as a human being how resilient people can be, and how we can change and adapt ourselves. And that's in fact, we have a lot of talent, which brings new innovation on a very short term. So I'm looking positive to the next decade. Yeah.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, I wonder if I can open the floor to the room. Or indeed from the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. Yes, the gentleman in the front there. Could we get a microphone to him? Or you can just shout. I think perhaps we can actually pass you this one. That might be the easiest. There we go. Thanks, Sam. So if you just introduce yourself and then tell us who you'd like to address your question to. Thank you.
Hello. What? Does not work.
We hear you. Yeah. Great. Welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I've been already on the stage this morning. Stefan Moritz, Secretary General of European Entrepreneurs, CAPME. We are also members of the Business Advisory Group for the Global Gateway, together with the Port of Antwerp-Bruges. And I appreciate it very much to be together also with the Port of Antwerp-Bruges in the subgroup on transport. Because we as small medium-sized enterprises rely very much on transport, and ports are gateways for transport, but not only for the transport. Ports are, and the example of Antwerp-Bruges, but also I hear it also as river port for Montreal, that the hinterland, the network, the backyard of the ports are a very important area, and Belgium's wealth came from the Port of Antwerp. And Belgium was born because the Port of Antwerp was losing ground to the Port of Rotterdam, and then the Belgians said, no, stop, let's do things alone. And my question would be, what are you doing? I mean, you were talking about the big players like BASF and so on, but what are you doing to promote the settlement of small and medium-sized companies in your areas? I don't know, free ports, if you have some kind of incentives, if you can involve them more in your work, and whatever.
Thank you very much. I'll take that microphone. Thank you. There we go. Would you like to go first? Okay, great.
I think we are doing a lot. A port is a very nice playground for innovation, startup, scale up. Yeah. So what we do is we organize ourselves to make that possible, and we support that this is possible. I can give you some examples. We have a specific venturing team, which is scanning what are the possible technologies which are interesting and linked, of course, to a port. Yeah, and where if we step in as venturing partner, where we really can make the difference for that specific company that nobody else can do. Just to give you one idea. Second one is that we have our own lab where companies can, startups, scale-ups, really can try out, and where we give our ports as an access for them to play. Yeah, and I can continue on that. I'm also chairman of the Belgian Hydrogen Council, for instance. Also there, we have a specific focus on startup scale-ups.
And Geneviève, let me pass that over to you. Do you want to give us any information on initiatives for startup scale-ups?
Maybe I can be more large on the question, but
go ahead.
We do facilitate some discussions with different companies within the industry or even elsewhere. When we talk about green biofuels or greener energy, it's a part that we can put into contact some smaller companies in Quebec with other companies. So it's something that we can do. And also with the expansion project that we have that is more on the east side of Montreal, that opens a lot of possibilities to new companies to establish their offices there. So we try to be more, as much as possible, present and have those discussions with different partners and facilitate discussions.
Thank you very much. I'd like to open the floor for any further questions that you might have. Yes, there's a gentleman in the back row there.
Hello, my name is Professor Lunson. I'm a neuroscientist interested in politics. I've been listening to your exchanges, and I shall be short, but just before attending the meeting today, I attended a meeting at the Baden-Württemberg representation on the European cohesion policy. I mentioned that there was an elephant in the room, which is the lack of trust. I have the same impression here. I am witnessing an interesting discussions, interesting intellectual entertainment. But the problem is still the same. There is this elephant in the room, the terrible lack of trust. How are you going to overcome this issue? And I shall finish by saying that we organized an international poll, an independent international poll on LinkedIn, asking the international community many questions. Do you trust the EU institutions? Do you trust the European Commission? Do you trust the European Parliament, the European the Council of Europe and United Nations? And the response was no, over 90%. So there is, to my mind, speaking of all these different initiatives, whilst forgetting that there is this terrible lack of trust, seems to me a bit superficial.
Thank you very much for your question, bringing up an interesting point there about trust, because I think we can talk about it from a few different perspectives. Trust between Europe and Canada, trust between you and your customers, and also, of course, with governmental institutions. Do you want to kick us off, Geneviève?
We are under federal law in Canada, and we do have the support from the federal. I will again come back to our largest expansion project, but we just received a support from the federal government of $150 million for that project, so it's very important. We are probably different as in Europe, but we are under federal law, but we are autonomous in doing our CapEx plan and fixing our tariffs. So in Canada, I don't think that there's no trust. The ports are important, and we are listened to by the government. So I don't know.
And what about between Canada and Europe? I mean, you've built a partnership. I guess that is building trust as well.
Yeah, I think that especially between ports, the trust is there.
I'm a bit surprised by the question, I must say. We have a very close cooperation with the European Commission. Yeah. This is the first time I hear the question of trust in that perspective. First time. I do also not understand where it comes from. Of course, do we have common challenges? That's something else. That's something else. So for sure, everything which is related to the clarity of energy transition, how do you put this into fast legislation? What is the budgets which are available for making it happen? And I talk then on hydrogen bank level. Yeah, of course, but that's not a question of threats. That's how do you make it happen? And there are a lot of questions to solve. But I've never heard, also not internally, a question of trust on the European Commission. No.
Well, of course, what mitigates discussions about trust is when you actually have a free trade agreement written down on a page in a text, right? And is that something you felt the impact of? I mean, it's been a few years that it's in force.
I do not know the figures if it changed completely. I'm not the one to discuss that neither. But it for sure helps that if you have trade agreements, that also bottom-up exercises are increasing and are. For us, I can only say that for us as a port authority, an important port authority in Europe, that we look very much at the transatlantic connection and I only see this increasing in the next decade only.
Did you want to add anything, Geneviève? Then I will open the floor again if anyone else would like to come in with anything further. Yes, there's a lady there in the middle. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us if your question is addressed to someone in particular or to the both panelists. There it is. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And just in case anybody didn't hear, the question was about technology, how much it's integrated in current processes, and if there's any challenges or plans for the future, correct?
I would say that technology is very important if we want to be more efficient. As I mentioned, we want the merchandise to transit very fast in the port. So as we can increase that transit time by using technology. As example, we developed a couple of years ago a portal for the trucks, so they can see in real time the time that they will wait until they get a container on the port, so they can time, and we open the gate longer. So it's with technology that we did that. Also to have a more predictive, a better prediction of the vessels that are arriving at the port is very important. So we are developing some data intelligence and working also with I didn't talk about that, but we have a large part of our containers that are using that use rail infrastructure. Right. So it's very important to have good previsibility, also to have that conversation with CN and CP that brings the train to the port, so that they are there at a good time, and that it can move faster. And at the same time, we are reducing GHG emission also, because it's much more efficient.
Tom, technology?
Well, technology is exactly one of the items also we can absorb and learn from the Port of Montreal, because they are much further advanced in that than we have in the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, to be honest. I'm still quite new in this industry, but it's shocking a bit how big the steps are still to be taken in the technology in supply chain. And the word speaks for itself. It's a supply chain, so it's a chain of all different type of players. And you do see that that information data is not going from one to the other, and how much inefficiency there is in the food chain. And that's really a challenge on the existing. So to give you an example, that everybody understands very clear, a vessel is arriving on a certain terminal, they are putting the containers wherever they think there is a spot without knowing what's the next mode of transport. So it can be completely on a different or a wrong place. And that's for one container, but for every container in every terminal, almost in every port worldwide. So having systems where we have a one common platform and blockchain or whatever, and we share data with each other will increase the efficiency of global supply chains so much. So that's really a big challenge, I think. And we will have the same in the future if we talk about energy transition with certification. How do we know that a molecule is coming from a certain country and has a certain color on a global scale? So I think also that will be an enormous challenge.
Well, you've almost opened up what could be a whole other panel or several there, but I'm afraid I have to draw this one to a close. So thank you so much to my speakers. I have on my left here Tom Hautekiet, who is the CCO of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, and further left I have Geneviève Deschamps, who's the President and CEO of the Port of Montreal, or Port de Montréal. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time, and audience members, I invite you to thank our panelists as well.